Well, I guess I just can't be pleased. I have talked about how some movies never take chances or play things safe instead of making bold statements. Well, this movie certainly is not one of them. The best thing about this movie is the swings that it takes and the bold choices that it makes. And I'm still not happy. Like, what is wrong with me? Why am I never satisfied? The Substance is a 2024 movie about an aging aerobics instructor who turns to a new drug in order to experience what life's like to be young again. Now, to be clear, I love that this movie took big chances and really went for it and had a distinct style and method. It was shot strangely at times, but clearly the director, Coralie Farget, who I know from her movie Revenge that she did a few years ago, which I also didn't really like, mostly because of its extreme choices. But what I can always applaud, whether I like a movie or not, is if I felt the director had a clear vision of what they wanted. Good or bad, I give points for that. And she definitely seemed to have a vision on this, true. And I ended up having a lot of problems with that vision, also true. But that's okay. Not everyone is gonna love everything. Now, I mentioned the director having a clear vision, and that vision is very specific with lots of super wides and crazy close-ups. It felt like a mixture of James Wan and Terry Gilliam. The set design and general production design was loud and over the top with these long hallways and odd architecture, which exacerbated the strange camera work. And speaking of camera work, I don't think I've ever seen a camera crawl over every inch of a person's body like it did with Margaret Qualley, and Demi Moore for that matter. There's a beauty sex theme that kind of permeates through this whole film, and the camera takes full advantage of exploiting that. Like, this movie would make an 80s horror director uncomfortable with the way the camera objectifies women's bodies. And side note, I did chuckle a little bit thinking of if this movie was directed by a man, the amount of outrage that would have been heard would have been deafening. But it's funny that nothing of this has been mentioned. I mean, to be clear, I don't have a problem with it either way. As long as everyone's fully on board with it and no one was pressured into anything, it really wouldn't bother me whoever directed it. It was just kind of a weird, funny thought I thought of while I was watching this movie. The movie itself centers on Elizabeth, who is an aging aerobic instructor who at one point had won an Oscar, I guess? But there's no real evidence of her being an actor in any sense. In her apartment and any memorabilia that she has, it's all aerobics based. So I'm not sure if in this world you can win an Oscar for aerobics. I don't know. Like, that kind of world building confusion is kind of at the heart of this movie. It has such a clear vision of how it wants to look, but what and how it is trying to say it felt a little muddled to me. Anyway, Elizabeth has turned 50 and has been pushed out of her job and is now deeply depressed. After getting into a car accident where she was basically unharmed, she's given a random number to call about a drug called The Substance. This company is some extremely clandestine organization that tells her that the substance will make a perfect version of her, but it's not two people, they are the same person, 1 week in each body. Now, after some trepidation, she decides to go ahead with it, and the process by which she has to administer the substance, I give this movie a lot of credit for. I mean, it gets into the body horror stuff, of course, but it really goes through every hoop and hurdle that she has to make in order to do this kind of complicated process. Like, this could have been a very light, sanitized drink once a day kind of thing, but it really shows the level of what she has to go through in order to achieve this goal, thereby showing the level of despair that she's in. So, after doing all that she needs to do, Sue, played by Margaret Qualley, is literally birthed from Elizabeth. And then she gets to live life anew as Sue, but it's only for 1 week at a time. Now, this is where things get a bit confusing, and I can't talk about this without spoilers, so skip ahead if you don't want to know. So I found the main theme of this movie confusing, as well as the overall conflict. Like, everything is the thinnest it could possibly be, and there's no real desire to add any texture to it. Let me explain. If the main theme is Hollywood and society as a whole is only obsessed with young, attractive people, and older women are getting pushed out, okay, that's a valid criticism. And in this world, it's all about looks. This posits a world where a daytime aerobics instructor is somehow the height of stardom. That and I guess the New Year's Eve show. Like it's kind of set in this strange futuristic world of the 1950s or something. And I would have imagined what with Elizabeth having experienced everything already and then just simply getting a young body, it would give her an advantage of combining experience and looks to really excel. But it seems like she just wants the new body and then does the exact same thing that she did the first time. It also suggests that just looks is everything. Like Sue never really does anything that shows anything more than that, as though she had some sort of calculations here. It's just that she's hot, which is okay, I guess, but they're in LA, it's a hard business. Like there are thousands of people that look great, but I felt like there needed to be something else besides her hotness that gives her the edge. In theory, that would be the knowledge and brain of Elizabeth. But this suggests none of that. Everyone kind of just fawns over her because of her looks. Now, I get the metaphor of Hollywood being superficial, but this is like a level 1 metaphor, and it could have had some really good cutting satire, but instead it kind of just uses a hammer and just smashes its way through. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is disappointing because it stays so surface level. And speaking of Sue, they keep saying that she's the same person. It's talked about several times, and she's even corrected several times when she mentions it. But is she the same person? If she's the same person, why does she begin sabotaging herself? And if she isn't the same person, why doesn't she stop it? Like, what is the point of this drug if Elizabeth doesn't seem to have the same experiences of Sue? Seemingly her whole goal is to experience being loved again. But if she isn't getting that, what's her motivation to keep going? Now, there could have been a very interesting dilemma here of them both having the same brain, as they keep saying, where Elizabeth has to leverage both worlds and they would be in this pact as one drew from the other. The other option is if they were in fact separate people, it became like a monkey's paw scenario where Elizabeth made this deal to be young, but then a separate other becomes a trick. And so she doesn't get to experience it all, but now she's stuck in this devil's bargain. But this movie doesn't really commit to either. And so it just focuses on the bombastic visual style and leaves everything else on the sidelines. Like, this is the type of movie that will get tons of attention because of its visual style and over-the-top scenes. Whether it's the amount of body horror, which, to be clear, has some excellent body horror, or just the fact that Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley are naked for like 40% of this film, and when they aren't naked, the camera is constantly pouring over their body in super close-ups. Like, everything about this movie is giant, and so with giant swings, it gets giant reactions. This felt to me a lot like that movie Malignant, where it's just trying to jam every giant impulse out there into every scene. Now, to be clear, the performances were really good, mostly by Demi. If I'm being honest, I think Margaret Qualley is an excellent actor, and she did fine in this movie, but she doesn't really do much until towards the end of the film. For most of the film, she's treated how most of the characters in this film treat her, like eye candy. Now, I give Demi a lot of credit for the amount of unglamorized nudity she had to do at 61, although I do wonder if this kind of undercuts the movie's position when the actress playing a 50-year-old is 61 and she still looks better than most 50-year-olds, mostly due to Botox, plastic surgery, personal trainers, and just simply having lots of money. Now, the end is, to put it mildly, pretty crazy. And there isn't a lot I want to talk about it because there's not really much to say about it aside from that. It really does completely go off the rails. I mean, once again, I have complained so much in the past about third acts just petering out, and this one does the exact opposite of that. Now, what kind of mileage you get out of it is completely subjective. It's fun. I will give it that. It is a lot of fun. Once again, there will be a contingent of people who will love how crazy it gets, just for the sake of crazy. But to me, it felt like a lot of noise and distractions, away from the fact that since they never really decided on a point to this whole story and split it between several options, they didn't know how to really finish it. And so they just went as big as they possibly could. I'd give this movie a C, but let me know what you think.